Just a minute, let me share my screen. So let me know when you are able to see the screen. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we can see.
So again, good evening and welcome to this session where we will be taking up the next chapter in Babaji Maharaj's Reality at Dawn. Till now, we had 4 sessions starting from 1st July. And today, we will take up this 5th chapter, Spiritual Training. So this superstructure or the interconnectedness between each topic, as I was telling you earlier, is simply something we have to marvel at, how Babaji builds on each of these concepts and topics and links them together. So if you are able to see that and remember that, it will be easier for you also to recall during exam regarding some specific questions, answers for specific questions. When he takes up this topic of spiritual training, interestingly, Babaji starts off with what is wrong type of training actually. And he attributes our present disable annotation. So he says our present moral condition as well as degradation that we see in the religion as it is practiced is due to 2 factors. One is, of course, the internal one, which is our wrong type of training, and also an external factor, which is our environment. So he says there is something totally wrong in the way we are training ourselves. And he says the main problem is in all these aspects of training, we are neglecting altogether the proper molding of the mind. Either when you take up, say, education, whether it is for technical or arts or whatever field of education, and if it is for some skill sets, acquiring skill sets, training. So there our focus is on something totally different. So he says proper molding of the mind is totally neglected. And what he means by that is that instead we should make every possible effort to provide for realization of the self, whereas it is the other way, the converse is true. What we see today, we equate success with a very comfortable life standard, and he says our present day focus is such that every possible effort is made to provide for worldly training of the right type in order to enable people to secure a very comfortable standard of living. But the proper training required for the realization of the self is altogether neglected, and we are all familiar with this current scenario. So this, he says, is a wrong type of training. And that is the root cause for our moral as well as religious degradation. So least significance, if at all, is attached to this most vitally important aspect of our life. And we generally pay very little or scanty attention to this requirement of the inner self. And some of us, we might just take up, say, reciting daily some few slokas in praise of gods or goddesses, or observing certain mechanical formalities by way of worship and things like that, as it is passed on to us. And this we tend to do for the entire life, and we are not really, clear about what is the objective that is to be achieved. So what happens is that internal calmness is still remaining wanting. And our mind, because it is unregulated, such the activities of the mind, such as desires, temptations, and emotional outbursts, remain as they were before. So there is no specifically targeted training to mold the mind. So then he says, what should be the actual type of training? He says the right type of training is that in which a person should start to imbibe within themselves as much of godly attributes as possible. A very unique way of defining this right type of training. He says, the only purpose of this right type of training is that we should start imbibing godly attributes. And if this is not achieved, the system of training is defective. Is altogether a very emphatic statement. Right type of training is that if it is not meeting this objective of imbibing godly attributes, then he says that training itself is defective and it is consequently of no avail, because we are trying to address the larger problem of life or the higher purpose of our human birth. So he says the proper making of a human being must be a natural result of this right type of training. It should evolve as a natural consequence of proper training. And this proper making is compromised. It is comprising of the right molding of the mind with due moderation in the exercise of all our senses and faculties. So moderation as well as molding, both are required as part of this training. So we saw now two distinct approaches of training which meet certain specific requirements. One is focused on meeting the worldly requirements. He says that is not enough. And the right type of training is that which makes us imbibe godly attributes as much as possible. So then, obviously, if you have to imbibe these godly attributes, it should be under the guidance of a guru, isn't it? So this we saw in the chapter of Guru, why we need a guru when we take up this path of spirituality. So the right type of training under the guidance of a capable master is by far the most important factor in our making. And he says, without that, higher attainments in spirituality are never possible. Again, a very emphatic and very vivid and clear statement on this aspect of right type of training. So what we stand in need of is a high caliber guru who can impart this kind of training for us. And if you see our ancient history, we had this Gurukula system where the relationship between guru and disciple was a very, very altogether different one compared to what we have in the present education system, isn't it? So then we ask this question of what is or who is a guru? When we say we should have right type of training under a capable master or a guru. If you remember the discussion between Joshua Polak and Daji Maharaj in Heartfulness, where this question is posed, who is a guru? Daji says it is up to us at what level do we accept him. So it is totally dependent on us. Guru is invariant, but our concept or our approach makes the difference. To some of us, he is just a mere formality. We'll just bow down before him and that's it. We might not remember him much. For others, he might be just a teacher. And some people, they might accept him at a higher level where they see him as the embodied living example of the teaching itself. And some are there, the blessed ones, for whom the guru is the very essence of the entire system. So he says, really, the guru is all of these. At different levels, he is different for people with different approaches or perspectives. And if you remember, we also have this tradition of, different levels of teachers, particularly in our system. We have this Prabodhak or Adhyapak or Upadhyay, Mahopadhyay or Acharya, and then that pinnacle is that of a guru. So this system is known to us that there are people of different caliber who can impart training up to a certain standard. And subsequently, they go to a next level of teacher. So please remember, right type of training earlier was imbibing godly attributes. Now the added element is that of training under a highly capable master for proper making of man. So he says most of us naturally have an inclination towards God. There is always that yearning or pull from within. But it is surprising that few actually succeed in God realization. He says it's very rare. What is the problem? The cause again is defective guidance and wrong training. So it is both of these. So the emphasis is not just on wrong training, but also wrongly imparted guidance. And it leads us away from the real path, with the result that we are lost in this maze of different approaches forever. So he says for someone of ordinary capacity, it is a pretty hard task to judge whether the training is receiving is rightly directed or not. What should be our ultimate goal? There is no clarity, because that kind of higher approach, if a guru is able to impart training for that kind of higher approach, automatically we will also get a kind of clarity on what should be our higher purpose in life and also how to lead the life, isn't it? So most of us very tamely and unquestioningly submit to these instructions of one whom we accept as a guru and practice whatever is prescribed by them. So it is very difficult to ascertain whether we are being guided along the right path or not. This is another serious problem, and that is the reason why you see such enormous number of different levels of gurus who claim to be imparting training of the right type. This is the serious problem of present day. That is the reason why, although people have this yearning, they are not able to address that need. So this is the great problem before the people and who are themselves unfamiliar with matters concerning realization, because it is a practical attainment in this field which is more important than theoretical knowledge, and it is all experiential knowledge. So then he says, how do we find out whether we are receiving the right type of training? So he says the indicators of right type of training are internal peace, calmness of mind, simplicity, and lightness. So very clear indicators are there if we are receiving right type of training. And he, of course, in the passing, he mentions there are people also who go to ridiculous extents and who prescribe, very, very superficial things like don't eat garlic or onion or carrot or something like that. And they give you some kind of very rigid sadhanas and practices which have no real significance, or under such triflings which never lead us towards reality. He says very, very emphatically again, this is no training. Such teachers are not only deceiving themselves, but are also deceiving all those for whom they are imparting this training. So he says we must be sure that unless internal peace, calmness of mind, simplicity, and lightness follow as the natural result of our practices, path of spirituality, we can conclude that we are proceeding on the wrong lines. And again, he says our training is defective. If these conditions are not met, the training is again defective. So these are the very clear indicators for receiving right type of training. And he again refers to the most common methods of training which are being adopted by majority of teachers today. They are based on hard and fast rules, and they don't really correspond to or are not commensurate with the current lifestyle, worldly life. Hence, in most cases, they provide almost things which are impracticable for those leading a worldly life, particularly a grihastha. So generally, these teachers try to induce people to practice restraint by adopting a particular form of living. Kindly mute. And it is quite disconnected with worldly concerns. And to practice devotion for hours together, maybe some of them might be prescribing hatha yoga techniques and pranayama for number of hours in a day, which is not practical. So he says, evidently, such type of training is not meant for majority of the people. in general who cannot dissociate themselves from worldly ties or devote so much time to their devotional. So they have to then renounce in the wrong way this world and run away to jungles and things like that. That's not again a practical correct approach. So he says the reason why this method of training is failing for majority of the people is that their preaching does not produce the desired effect, and in spite of their best efforts, they fail to mold the aspirants accordingly. The fact is that they are more theoretical than practical. So this is another point we have to pay attention to when we are trying to take up a right type of training to achieve this objective. Not only these indicators, but also we should focus on the practical aspects. So what is the need of the hour is integration of both the wings or both the aspects of our worldly existence. That is the material as well as the
Everyone
spiritual
should get a
aspects of
chance.
life. So he says the spiritual as well as worldly life must go side by side. Not only that, they should be equally resplendent. So he poses this question: is it ever possible for humanity at large to renounce this world for the sake of liberation? Certainly not. It's not a feasible situation. So then he says, what good then do most people derive from these kind of teachings which prescribe such very rigid type of practices for long hours in a day, which is not commensurate or not in tune with the current lifestyle. And some of these teachers are also bold enough to proclaim their mistaken notion that higher attainments in spirituality are not possible in the grahastha ashrama or household life, and they start prescribing the sannyasa life kind of thing, which is again an absurd notion, which Babaji Maharaj makes it very clear. So it really means that they have nothing to impart to people except to tell them certain superficial things, like bathing in Ganges or doing tirtha yatras and things like that. So he is quite critical of these kind of approaches, where we are not able to integrate both material as well as spiritual aspects of life. So the real problem to be addressed is not to provide for these kind of means for very few of the chosen few, but who are ready to renounce the world and run away and take up this sannyasi path. There is some noise in the background. Please mute. But for people in general whose duties in the world, besides the devotional, are manifold. This is the problem.
Brother, we can't hear you.
I was trying to check because of some background noise. I was trying to check where is it coming from. Okay.
There's no background noise for us at least, brother.
Okay. So you're saying it is essential that their aspects of spiritual as well as material aspects should go together, and for this we have to discover the right means, and it should be inclusive. It's not meant for only certain few select people who are in a position to take up such drastic steps, but for the majority of the populace who are conducting their worldly life, along with that they should be able to take up these spiritual practices. So it is all inclusive, or you should be talking about this aspect of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So this problem which we need to address is to provide training for the entire humanity. And there is this aspect of balance, integration, and osmosis. See, Daji poses this question, philosophically speaking, the idea of balancing material and spiritual aspects of life is okay. We are taking up this kind of discussion. They belong to two different dimensions, material and spiritual. So, how to balance things from different dimensions? Please ponder over this. So, it's something we need to spend some time on. Then he talks about designing our destiny through the help of a capable guru or master. And he actually says the master is the only person who is able to shape our destiny. So proper spiritual training fitting closely with the present day world life is therefore the only thing required for spiritual growth. An example is the set of heartfulness practices, very simple. The daily core heartfulness practices can be so easily integrated into our present day life. And we can also go about our worldly life in addition to addressing this need. And he says, till now it has been unfortunately neglected. We have any number of instances where we hear of people taking up these esoteric practices and our sannyasa path or rishiminis and things like that. But people from the grihastha ashrama who are able to lead a worldly life and also together lead this spiritual life is a very difficult combination. So what we need for such type of training is help from outside. In most cases, this help comes from the guru or the master, and he is the only person who can shape our destiny. Also, Daji refers to this in one of the heartfulness articles, magazine articles, where he talks about vrittis, pravrittis, prakriti, and prarabdha. Vrittis are these, our thought patterns or tendencies. Pravrittis are the habits. Then prakriti is, as a result of these vrittis and pravrittis, what we form as or we manifest as our character, and that finally leads to our weaving of destiny. So when we get this help from the guru, our spiritual life is awakened. So we are all familiar with this very often heard Upanishad like saying, Uttishtata Jagrata Prapyavaran Nibodhata. So Uttishtata, he taps us and kind of makes us awake. Then arise awake, that is the call. So then what happens is, as a result of this, when we are in this spiritual, we are awakened to the spiritual life, the higher powers of the soul are also aroused, and that helps propel our growth. So this impulse is to be sought from one of our fellow beings of the highest caliber. That is automatically the guru, and who may be within our approach ready to solve our difficulties at any time. So it is again, we have to seek for a proper high caliber guru who can help us. But there are also instances where he talks about people listening to their inner voice or conscience guiding them and things like that. Then he says, in most of the cases, this is actually misleading, and it can also result in certain serious problems. There are those who practice seeking inspiration from and guidance from gods and demigods, or from some departed soul, treating it as a guru or master. In most cases, it's very dangerous, and we are familiar with these type of practices, who where people profess to exhibit the godly presence in them at certain times. And also, he says, similar is the situation with people who seek guidance from the inner voice, so-called inner voice. And he also talks about one particular case which was very difficult for him to deal with. He says he spent almost 2 years in trying to mold or rectify the problem of this kind of practice of listening to the inner voice. Basically, he was referring to one person of his time who claimed he was able to listen to Tulsidas ji, Sant Tulsidas, and then they had some argument and all sorts of, uh, delusional thinking developed in him. So he says, actually, listening to the inner voice requires the covering of mal, vikshepa, and avaran. These are the impurities, the coverings which are to be removed, and the mind is brought to a state of perfect poise and moderation. Then we are able to listen to this inner voice and get proper guidance. So then only we get this inspiration or guidance from within. Otherwise, it's mostly misleading. So he says, in particular case, 2 years of hard labor with him, then he was cured of this problem of inner voice. So that is something which you can all read about. But he says, in reality, the inner voice, in fact, is the voice of the mind in its perfectly pure state. So unless we bring it to that state, inner voice will not have much meaning for us. And for that, it requires clearing it of all pollutions and defilement, and then we are able to develop this state of moderation and peace. And he says, for one who is able to achieve this state of moderation and perfect purity and peace, it is actually the inner voice alone that always speaks. And that means basically is continuously getting guidance from the higher levels. The inspirations are there, and he is getting these impulses from highly developed, liberated souls also, continues to flow to them continuously. And this, an outstanding example is these Whispers 1944, or the Diaries of Babuji Maharaj, where on a daily basis he was having communication with so many highly elevated souls. So for attaining realization, then he takes up what are the requirements. He says to attain realization, an iron will to achieve the goal, together proper means and guidance are the only things required for achieving success. He also says God is simple and can be achieved by equally simple means. And we saw an example which he cites in the earlier chapter where he talks about trying to pick a needle by utilizing a crane, which is not the proper approach. And he is giving an assurance. He says very sincerely, he is giving the assurance that realization is not at all difficult, if only you earnestly divert your attention to it. So, which Daji also talks about. He says it's a question of interest. If interest is there, you don't really need to apply your will. This we discussed earlier. So it is Babuji is giving a kind of assurance. He says realization is not at all a difficult thing. So what is required to achieve this realization is an iron will, together with proper means and guidance from the master, and a set of practices which we can implement. So now he comes to the actual aspect of training. We saw wrong and right type of training, different criteria which can be which will say let us know that we are receiving right type of training. Now he talks about actually the spiritual training starts with inner cleaning. So that is the first and foremost aspect, and of the purification of the chakras, which is the most essential factor in spiritual advancement. So the right type of training in spirituality begins with these things. Inner cleaning, if it is neglected, will lead to abuse of power acquired through yogic means. This is again something we are familiar with. We have read so many of these stories in the Puranas and epics, where people went astray because of the powers or siddhis they developed as a result of some amount of approach on the spiritual path. So essential thing is to make sure that we don't get into any of such aberrations, and that will be possible only if there is thorough cleaning of inner self and our entire system, which means purification of the chakras. This will automatically also bring our focus or bring our attention to our character formation, which is basically the yamas and niyamas, which are complementary. One is refining our behavior through removing unwanted things which we try to eschew, and other one is the niyama part of the do's or the integrating noble qualities and inculcating them. And both these techniques are complementary, and yama and niyama are the first two steps in the Ashtanga Yoga path, which Patanjali describes all these different aspects through the sutras, Yoga Sutras. So what is this inner cleaning? We have, of course, the Hatha Yogic techniques where they try to cleanse the system through mostly physical practices, and some of them are too hard and tedious for all and sundry. And we are again familiar with this. We have quite a few specific asanas for these kind of cleansing and also pranayama techniques. But he says it is extremely tedious and hard, and also some of them, if not properly done, can result in serious problems. Whereas under the system of Sajmarg, it is accomplished by easy practical means, aided by the power of yogic transmission by the capable guru. He says some of the religious teachers insist, if we are interested in this, higher pursuits, aspirant should devote a huge number of hours, say 8 hours in a day, for practicing certain things and things like that. He says, I strongly condemn that type of training, which enforces practices and that which tax the brain or over mind. He says they are to be completely avoided. And because of such wrong type of training, he says people find no scope for expansion, and consequently the power of realization grows dull. It's like forcing a child to induce them to concentrate. So this is absolutely to be avoided. What we are focusing on are very natural means. So strenuous labor with long and tedious physical practices, because this is again and again emphasizing this, because we are all enamored with these different approaches where we spend a lot of time on these yoga asanas and pranayama techniques, because there is also the element of ego, isn't it? So this is very commonly referred, and mostly present day yoga is equated with Hatha Yogic asanas and pranayama. Although it's again, he says it's a paradox, because yoga is, it's yujyate it yoga, it is yoking together the lower and the higher self, and that aspect is completely missing. And we are now focused on a very narrow sense in terms of what is called as yoga, or understood commonly by the term yoga. And for attaining this, we obviously take up meditation under the guidance of a master, and who is also able to extricate us, from all these problems by removing complexities and entanglements. This simplified course of spiritual training has rendered the highest spiritual flight possible for everyone. We are familiar with the the stories of our hierarchy of masters who have attained the highest possible approach to human beings. And he says it is possible. We have also other examples where it is, there are no caste, creed, or any other backgrounds coming into consideration. He says anybody can take up, old or young, man or woman, grihastha or non-virakta, meaning a recluse and things like that. So capable teacher, what does he do? He does this by his own effort, exercising the power of transmission. So the preliminary step in this right type of training is that the aspirant's tendencies are directed towards God. That happens, we have certain techniques even in our system where we are able to divert the thought stream. And when our mind is diverted towards God, we naturally begin to feel ourselves in touch with that supreme power in all our actions and workings over a period of time through sadhana. And we slowly start developing or imbibing these divine qualities, and also we are in the state of remembrance for most of the time. Then is another topic which he dealt with briefly is this that of japa, because it is again a very popular practice taken up or advised by our traditional systems, where a lot of emphasis is placed on this japa of certain mantras and things like that. He says the inner vibrations in the heart will soon be felt by the aspirant as a result of these practices. And that he says, and the practices are something which like we do in the heartfulness practices, something which is natural, aided by yogic transmission, which are bringing about these changes or molding the brain and the mind and things like that. So he says this is the beginning of this spiritual state known as Shabda Rajapa, where this instead of japa, where we are mechanically, reciting ad nauseum the same thing for many times for many number of hours, this is something which happens naturally as a result of these practices. And it develops automatically and proceeds along this, once one proceeds along the right path under proper guidance. But majority are not having access to such practice. They take up japa outwardly for a very long time, and some of them, they find that even during sleep they are reciting these things, and which can be taken up as japa, and they misunderstand this as ajapa, because they feel it is not volitional during sleep, or it is not really so, he says. It is because of the constant practice, they have become habituated to this recitation, and that is what they misunderstand as ajapa. That is not the case. Ajapa is a spiritual state. So the condition of ajapa, which is rightly believed to be a high spiritual achievement acquired after many years of labor, and is only a matter of weeks or days in our system, he says, through right training by the process of transmission. So transmission is the most important or vital element in our system. And these vibrations, when we have this state of ajapa developed in us, slowly after a period of time, they gradually develop to other chakras also. Say they remain for some time located in the heart, after which they gradually develop over to other chakras and finally to every particle of the body. When that happens, it is called anahat. So japa, ajapa, and anahat. So he says again, for this, we don't really focus on developing this. It happens as a natural consequence of the practice of meditation under heartfulness. And then he talks about, because we are talking about meditation, the main complaint is that of numerous thoughts creeping into the aspirant's mind at the type of meditation. And because of this, they think erroneously that they have failed in actually not doing meditation in a proper manner. Because their idea is, he says, unless the mind is brought to a standstill, they have not done a proper job of meditation. He says, we are not practicing concentration, but meditation, and that happens at the subconscious level. Naturally, we are all familiar with this. Because the flow of ideas is at the conscious mind level, which is never at rest. Whereas when we start with this sankalpa and then proceed with this meditation, we are still busy in meditation with our subconscious mind, whereas our subconscious mind is still roaming about and forming ideas. He says we are not losers in any way, even if we have surfacing of thoughts during meditation. But In due course, after sufficient practice, the conscious mind also gets molded, and then when it is in harmony with the subconscious mind, slowly we'll find that we are almost entering into this thoughtless state, or we have very few thoughts, or we are not disturbed by them. So we are able to achieve that finally the state of calmness, which is the characteristic of the soul. It becomes predominant. So he says in certain cases, people exercise their willpower. The teacher exercises the willpower and forcefully tries to do something. He says that is to be totally avoided, because creating a temporary state of senselessness or suspension of thoughts is not something to be done, because this practice again creates internal heaviness and dullness of mind. Even hypnotism, he says, if it is uh, inadvertently, it can result in these kinds of problems if it is not taken up for therapeutic healing proper part, but because of some other interests. So again, coming back to this, the test of spiritual progress is constant growth of lightness of mind and spirit, which is the surest test of spiritual progress. So we are given a beautiful criteria where we can ourselves measure what is happening and whether we are on the right path. So if we are growing lighter day by day, we can conclude that we are on the right path. Otherwise, we are receiving wrong type of spiritual training. So thus, the real spiritual training is that these are the concluding definitive statements from Babaji Maharaj regarding spiritual training. He says it should be making our mind disciplined and regulated, restores moderation in senses and faculties, and creates lightness of spirit. So this he says, this is towards the conclusion part where he says, this is the real spiritual training, and we should all look for getting this kind of training. Then alone, he says, internal peace and calmness is ensured and a higher approach is possible. And obviously for this, the medium of a worthy master of high caliber, having the power of yogic transmission at his command, is absolutely essential. And to him, as aspirants, we must surrender with full faith and confidence. So these are all the required elements which, if they are in place, success, he says, is assured. Then he also talks about this aspect of initiation. And because a lot of people erroneously think that if they go to a highly evolved guru and they are initiated, and that is enough and the problem of life is solved forever. This notion, he says, although literally true, may not be very encouraging unless you, the aspirant, also surrenders to the guru, and the master is also of an especially high caliber. So he says, as our part is, the aspirant's duty is what? To try our best to save the master from unnecessary exertion on our behalf. We must also cooperate with him as much as we can and do ourselves, put in all the efforts for advancing ourselves. And we should never neglect our part of the duty. Then there is this tremendous focus, or people are enamored with this Mahavakyas from the Vedas and Upanishads and start getting into discussions or even arguments, and they're all spending a lot of time on such things. External mechanical processes for developing certain spiritual conditions in a seeker are not effective and leads again to internal grossness, he says. So he says the state of Aham Brahmasmi is so widely discussed and touted as the ultimate thing is created internally but not by mechanical means. And simply repeating this Aham Brahmasmi like a parrot repeating itself will not be of any avail, he says. It will not make us jnanis. They can repeat this hundreds or thousands of times, but it is of no use, and they are far away from this aspect of Brahman. Thus, the state of Aham Brahmasmi is which is supposed to be created is not really a genuine one, and it depends merely on the words of the person who is continuously doing this japa. He also gives a very revelatory statement where he says, generally we believe Aham Brahmasmi is a kind of very highly exalted state or very high attainment, but he says it's not really so. At this stage, a very important thing to remember, he says, though relieved, this person or aspirant is relieved to some extent of the entanglements of Maya, he is not still beyond its final limit. So a person who is able to taste this condition of Aham Brahmasmi is still caught up in the tangles of Maya. Because consciousness of self still exists at this stage, we are aware, which is nothing but grossness, that's what he says, though in a very, very subtle form. So as long as we are having this consciousness of the self, still we are remaining, or we are falling short of the ideal. And those who preach jnana beyond which little remains to be achieved are actually mistaken, he says. This Ahasmi is not our destination. We just pass by it where we go on to the next and higher stages. So this is again an erroneous approach where we think that this is the end of everything and we have achieved reality and the final goal. He says such persons are committing a serious blunder. So what we have to arrive at is a point where everything ends, including this idea of hum or I. We lose that sense of individuality. So that is the final goal or the final point where we are entering into a state of complete negation. Such is the state of negation, complete negation, which we have to finally attain, and where this cry of aham or I will be quite out of tune. Because the state of Aham Brahmasmi is originally caused by consciousness or Chaitanyata, which automatically develops as we march along this path under proper guidance. And because it produces vibrations within, the result is that the mind also begins to echo some of these same vibrations. So the final goal is that state of complete negation. And he says, the state of mind, the Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, all is Brahman, and all from Brahman, these three states occur at every stage of spiritual progress in their forms. And he says, all these three conditions finally end when we are able to step into the central region after crossing the 16 circles. So these three conditions also disappear when we step into the central region. I am Brahman, this is Aham Brahmasmi, all is Brahman, and all from Brahman. He says actually this is entire state is in all its three aspect is in fact unity in diversity in different forms. It appears in a crude form in the Pinda Pradesh or the heart region, in the first 5 circles of the heart, in the diagram depicted from reality at dawn. And it becomes somewhat finer and subtler when we get into the Brahmanda Mandal, the 6th chakra, the 6th region between 6th and 7th circles. And when we are in the Parabrahmanda Mandal, he says it becomes extremely subtle. But please remember, after entering into Parabrahmanda Mandal, when we progress on to higher regions, and we are about to enter this central region after crossing the first 16 circles, all these three states disappear, and they end within the first 16 circle. That's what he says. So extremely different, and it's again a remarkably different take on these aspects of Aham Brahmasmi. So Aham Brahmasmi is I am Brahman. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, all is Brahman is that. Yatova imani bhutani jayante. These are again taken from different Upanishads. One is from Brihadaranyaka, another is from Chandogya. And the third one is from Taittiriya Upanishad. So we have a question I thought would be interesting to discuss the difference between consciousness and awareness. I'll just give you a glimpse of this. There is a informal discussion with Daji in 2016 where he reveals some of the answers to this. So this is just the recap of all the topics which we discussed today, starting with wrong type of training, then the right type of training, people having natural inclination towards God but not being very successful. What are the indicators of right type of training? How we should be able to integrate and lead an equally resplendent life, both material as well as spiritual aspects. How we are able to, the master is shaping our destiny or designing destiny. We had a look at what is inner voice, and what is the first initial step in this process is the inner cleaning and purification of the chakras, molding of the mind, and directing the tendencies towards of the mind towards God. Then this aspect of japa, ajapa, and anahata. How to deal with thoughts during meditation. What are the sure spiritual the tests during this spiritual progress? What is actual real spiritual training, and what is our duty as an aspirant? These external and mechanical processes and their consequent problems. And of course, towards the end, he discusses this aspect of Aham Brahmasmi or I am Brahman, and what actually is the final goal at which we have to arrive. So then he gives a summary of what should be the right course of training for an aspirant of spirituality. So that is how these are all interconnected topics, whereas the main focus is on what should be our spiritual training. These are some of the questions you can ponder over. I think that's it. Okay, let me stop sharing. And let me see if we can take up questions now or go for the next one. I think it will be too much if we go to the next chapter immediately. Raghu brother is there. Oh, yeah. So I would suggest we can spend some time, we take a break in this, otherwise it becomes a monotonous thing. Okay.
I think maybe
So-
5-10 minutes of break before we go to the next topic.
Okay. So the questions are welcome. You still took 1 hour. A lot of.
You stop the screen sharing, I think.
Yeah, I've stopped. I've stopped, no? We are still seeing the screen.
We can still see the screen. We can't see the gallery view.
I've stopped.
Now better.
Sorry. I'll mute myself. So what Raghu brother was, referring to, if we are able to, from your own side also, you can make some notes and, see which are all the key aspects or the highlights or main topics and see the interconnectedness between them. You'll be able to definitely recall immediately the pertinent points when such questions crop up.
So one just caution from last examination on 12th, last Saturday. In spite of us repeatedly telling you people not to write in the book, one of the aspirants had come having written in the book, so they had to get new books and give it to him from the library. So that was actually good on their part. They were very considerate. Sometimes they send them off from the examination, or they say that the closed book section also should be, the open book section also should be written in the closed book section, like a closed book. So please do not take chances, sir. Don't write anything. And some people who had written in pencil, they made them rub it. So this was something that happened last Saturday. And then I told them, we have told them repeatedly not to write. But in spite of that, they come writing some meanings of the words or some expansion, some acronyms, something they would have written. So just keep that in mind. So don't write anything in the book. You can underline, highlight. That's okay. Okay.
Girish Babu Dasa. Ananta is also raised. Yeah.
Excuse me, brother.
Hello.
Yeah, Girish Babu here. Uh, Sir, this Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Karma Yoga, how these three are included in our heartfulness practice? And regarding that, I want to know.
This I displayed a couple of slides in our earlier session where Daji talks about these aspects, and all three aspects being integrated into our heartfulness practices. We also have a specific article in Heartfulness magazine on this, Jnana, Bhakti, and Karma Yogas. So I would suggest you read that because it's a very elaborate one, unless Brother Raghu wants to address it in
I think
talk about
rather
it.
than, I think it might be better for him to read that article because it's
That's
quite elaborate.
Yeah, and there are lot of finer nuances in that, where it is not just a very superficial thing, but very profound, things are revealed to us when he talks about Jnana Bhakti, and it's a very high order and totally different take compared to what usually we see in common parlance.
And it's
I can
also
share,
partly it's also partly there in the heartfulness way.
yeah.
He describes about what is Karma Yoga, what is Gnana Yoga, and how it is incorporated in our practice. So heartfulness way also gives a glimpse of it, but it's not as detailed as in other areas where Daji describes about it.
Which book is to be read, sir?
We will share that article with you. I'll post it in this group itself.
Okay.
The Heartfulness magazine article, I have that soft copy. I can post that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Ananta.
Well, this is a question that from something in page 77. There it talks about this thoughts, right? Dealing with thoughts. And it says the flow of ideas is due to the activities of our conscious mind, which is never at rest. And then it says we are still busy in meditation with our subconscious mind. So I was just thinking that what is it? Are we in meditation? Are we in meditation with our subconscious mind? So that was a bit puzzling for me. I thought I have not seen that before.
You want to answer, brother? Or you want?
See, there are two minds that we are all aware of, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. When we start meditation, we start at the conscious mind level because we are still in the conscious mind level. The subconscious mind is that part of the mind which is actually filled with the samskaras. Okay? So if we have this perspective in mind, the moment we start meditation, we gradually start going into ourselves. We start going in. So we know that in meditation, the attention of the mind has to go inwards. So when it starts going inwards, where can it go? It has to go to the subconscious only. It cannot go anywhere else. So it has to go inwards. So the mind's attention now starts going towards the subconscious mind. Now what happens when the mind starts going towards the subconscious mind? The whatever is deposited in the subconscious mind now starts rising to the surface because of the heat of the meditation. So now what is happening is at the conscious mind level, you are actually being bombarded by the thoughts which is coming up from the subconscious mind. But at the subconscious level, you are held by something from within, where the mind is kept at that level of the subconscious mind, which is what we call as, we feel in the meditation as absorption. We feel absorbed in meditation. Now, where do we feel absorbed? Where is the mind when we feel absorbed? It is in the subconscious mind. So, in other words, you're actually meditating at the subconscious mind, while at the conscious mind level, these samskaras, which were actually stored now, they are now raising to the surface and they are actually felt at the conscious mind level. So, in that way, what happens is, although we are not thinking anything at the conscious mind level, the subconscious thoughts are now raising to the surface, which we perceive at the conscious mind level. But at the same time, we also feel absorption, which is at the subconscious mind. That's exactly what Babuji has written there. Hope it's easy.
Also, Master discusses this aspect in the heartfulness way. You would have read, we start off our meditation with dharana or the sankalpa. So that intention also makes, when we are seeding our subconscious with that, there is this activity which is going on. And second thing is, it's not unique that we are having thoughts during meditation only, but we are not paying much attention rest of the time when we are absorbed in whatever activity we are doing. Then we are not troubled by these thoughts. But during meditation, when we are passively observing, suddenly we become more attentive or we become more aware that such thoughts are arising, isn't it? Suddenly we find not only because of the trees, and also, as he said, because a kind of vacuum gets created and it just, sucks up all this, what is there in the bottom. So we become more and more aware and we get worried why this kind of thoughts are coming. So this is not something, the mind is never at rest. Its function is to think, and the thoughts are always there. It is a question of whether we are troubled by them or not, whether we are paying attention to them or not, and how we are engaging ourselves. When we are enjoying certain things which we are doing, we are not troubled by thoughts, although they might be there at the background. This is what he explains in the heartfulness way. And also, we are not putting any efforts. During meditation, this is a very unique and beautifully developed, this which we are not paying much attention to, where he says meditation is effortless focus on an infinite object. Very, very, very key operative words that he builds in. So that is how we have to, take this aspect of conscious mind awareness and subconscious mind, where the process is still ongoing because that seeding is there, intention, dharana, with which we start our meditation.
So in thoughtfulness way, that's where he talks about that wine bottle, right? It went through that, so it comes out. Is that what you're hinting to?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, brother.
Whatever thoughts are there, it is something within from us. It is unique to us and it is from within. Isn't it?
Sorry, brother. Just in continuation to the same, just one question. Is it okay? Yeah. So we are speaking about the conscious part and the subconscious part. With the pranahuti, we all are aware that it also taps to the superconscious and it also expands, right? So where means is it at the stillness and that state of mind where we also end up with the superconscious thing, which will also come into the fact, right? It's not just two; it's the third part also.
True. That's what he talks about. Superconscious is what is above. Consciousness is the thin layer or the sandwich, and we have two infinities of superconsciousness and subconscious. So superconscious is something which is beyond us, which is beyond our reach. Through meditation, slowly we are converting that incrementally parts and parts of this, super consciousness to our conscious level. That is what we mean when we are talking about expansion into both the realms. The consciousness, it is so small as a sandwich, then we are able to access this higher part which is there in the super conscious. So it is no longer, once we are aware, it is no longer super conscious. That is how we keep expanding into both the realms.
Yeah, true. Sorry, maybe my question was at that what means once the vacuum is created, means as we understood, the subconscious thoughts, because the heat, it just comes up, and then we experience those thoughts and emotions. Okay, but when it is the super conscious, okay, is it the stillness or is it how do we tap into that super conscious? Though we meditate on the point A, and that we understand that the super consciousness expansion would happen, but literally similar to that vacuum concept, is there anything for super conscious, or it's just the prayerful state or something like that? Is what I wanted to ask.
The super consciousness, for facilitating accessing the super consciousness, we have these micro practices of point A meditation and point B cleaning. And they have far reaching consequences because that impact is there. Like now, Babaji talks about in the efficacy of Raja Yoga, specific points called D, D1, D2, D3, and D4, I think. So chakra 1, heart chakra, we have in the upper part, we have this point of super consciousness. Then once we reach the sixth point or sixth chakra, Brahmanda Mandal, it is at a different location. D3 is when we reach this 10th chakra, and then highest is in the 13th. So what we are talking about when we say super consciousness, it is the inspiration or the, the I don't know how to express that. It's basically an inspired situation where we are getting that inspiration or constant flow from above. It is not something willed by us, isn't it? That is what we would call it as a revealed knowledge. Like Babaji, when we discussed in the very first session, he talks about how he wrote these books. He says, in that state of super consciousness, I received it from above. So received it from above is not by words, it is not a dictation. It is vibrations which he received, he felt them, and then he gave expression to them in terms of words. That is how I understood. Unless Raghu brother can add.
See, there are stages in which we go through the work in the subconscious and the superconsciousness. Okay. Now, one question for us to ponder about is the work in superconsciousness possible without the work in the subconsciousness happening first? If we are going to be full of samskaras, would we be in a position to actually tap into the superconsciousness and actually get benefit out of it? The answer to that is probably
No.
not possible. So the first and foremost thing is that we have to get rid of certain things in the subconscious mind. So the moment when we actually go into the subconscious mind, many of the people, when they start the meditation, they report that they feel lost in meditation. They are not able to be aware of anything. That is when you are actually sucked, when you start going into the subconscious mind, you start getting sucked into the samskaras. So you are totally lost. You have no awareness what has happened. When the samskaras get cleaned up to a certain extent, say a few sessions happen, they start getting cleaned up, that Abhyasi now reports lightness. Then thirdly, as and when the work further progresses, as the samskaras are removed and the colors and the conditions in the consciousness is now revealed, you are now talking about the third stage where the consciousness is able to kind of give you an indication about some colors or the feelings or vibrations, various other things that you can actually feel at the chakra. This is the third stage. In the fourth stage, you actually start feeling that all these conditions have now been absorbed and imbibed and they actually disappear, where you feel actually emptiness or nothingness. So these are like 3-4 stages that you pass through as the work occurs through the subconscious process, subconscious level. Very similarly, if you go through the work in the superconsciousness level, initially you feel that there is no awareness, you have no clue. You will not say that you are lost. When you touch the superconsciousness, you will say, I don't know what happened. You will not report that you are lost. There is no awareness. When we expand into the superconsciousness, there is no awareness, but there is no feeling of being lost. Feeling lost is generally when we feel sucked in by the samskaras. So in the first stage of superconsciousness expansion, we feel that we don't know what happened. Second stage, we are now aware of what is happening. Third stage is we are not only aware that something is happening, but now we have more specific awareness about what exactly is happening. What exactly happens in the superconsciousness, as with the third stage where the conditions of the consciousness is revealed, the conditions that occurs in the superconsciousness is generally 4 in variety. They don't keep changing. They are kind of pretty much the same across the journey. So we spoke about it earlier on, the nice newness, inspiration, clarity, and energy. The nice acronym that we spoke about earlier on. So that is what happens in the third stage. In the fourth stage, like in the subconsciousness, we actually assimilate the condition and then they become part of us. Likewise, we assimilate these nice feelings and they become part of our journey and they become now available for our life. Now you just look at this in terms of how do we change in meditation. For us to actually change in meditation, the work needs to occur both in the subconscious and the superconsciousness. For example, a particular situation that we are in. If we are going to have a particular pattern in which we are going to handle a situation, where is that pattern stored? That pattern is stored in the subconscious mind. Now, the subconscious mind has to get cleaned to a certain extent so that the pattern is weakened. Now, just because a pattern is weakened doesn't give you an automatic way of handling the same situation in a different way. For that, you require other things to come into play. You require the newness, new perspective on the same situation. You require inspiration to actually change yourself. You require energy to change yourself. And you also require clarity regarding what are all the alternatives available in that particular situation that you can actually select and implement in order that you can actually change the outcome. So these four things actually enables you to actually develop alternatives for the same situation, handling of the same situation, so that you have a different outcome than past. Without the cleaning of the samskaras, without the weakening of the samskaras, if the work is only about weakening of the samskaras, then what happens is you go back to the same situation, and because there is a pattern there, the river channel is still there, you end up repeating the same thing until unless something opens up in the super consciousness which gives you clarity, wisdom, and inspiration to change your response. Only when both these things occur, we actually start changing fundamentally in our life. With only one of the thing occurring, it's very, very difficult. That's why we see that when an abhyasi does not touch the super consciousness, the pace of change in life of an abhyasi is actually pretty slow. When both the things are actually being worked on simultaneously, Abhyasi can clearly differentiate between these two, where the super consciousness is being worked on and the subconsciousness is worked on. Now, if you were to look at it in a slightly different way, this is a question that you need to ponder about. If you look at subconscious as below and super consciousness as above, you get one perspective. If you look at slightly different perspective, that if the subconscious is cleaned of the samskaras, what happens to it? It becomes the conscious. If the subconscious is removed of the samskaras, it becomes the consciousness. Then if the consciousness is further expanded, it becomes the superconsciousness. The difference between consciousness and the superconsciousness is that the potentiality is increased in superconsciousness, which is not there in the consciousness. That's the fundamental difference. That you are actually working on the superconsciousness. The potentiality is increasing. In other words, effortless increase in the output is possible when the consciousness is converted into superconsciousness. But remember earlier, if the work of subconsciousness being converted into consciousness has not happened, there is no possibility that the consciousness can get converted into superconsciousness. So they are all sequential things. One after the other, it will happen. Okay.
Thank you, brother. That was very insightful. So, in nutshell, they speak about when Master also refers to the and Gayatri mantra, okay, which is also a vehicle to take it to that ultimate wisdom, right? And in the story of this Vishwamitra, which is coming out for this Gayatri mantra, they also say about the same aspect, right? Which is if you utter that Gayatri mantra in that specific time and so on, it actually reveals that wisdom, which is the super conscious wisdom.
Whether any mantra can actually take you to the ultimate, you have doubt. This for the simple reason, what is there in the ultimate? The condition that is there in the ultimate is static. Remember that we were just reading Maxim 1 in the morning in the pre-work session in our group. What is the condition of the absolute? It is static. Remember this word. Every other thing beyond that is dynamic or active. When we want to go back to the absolute, we have to become static. If you want to read about it a bit more, you can just read the Maxim 1 in the context of asana or posture. Babuji explains about it. Now, if you want to go back to the static, you have to curtail your activity, bring it back to the latent condition, and from there you can actually go back to the static condition. Now look at Babuji clearly mentions in the book, in the complete work itself. I think we read in some other part of the book that Apart from Raja Yoga, there is no other way that you can go to the center. It's only Raja Yoga alone that can take you to the center. Now, just look at it from this perspective, static and activity perspective. In Karma Yoga, you are very active. You are not in static state. You are very active. So it cannot take you to the ultimate. In Bhakti Yoga, your feeling part is very active. It cannot take you to the highest because one part of you is very active. Again, in Gnana Yoga, the intellectual part is very active. So that can also not take you to the ultimate. Again, in Mantra Japa, as long as you are kind of active in a certain level, it cannot take you to the ultimate. So this question that you actually posed about whether Gayatri Mantra can take you to the ultimate, or for that matter, any mantra, I think it's something for you to kind of ponder about. There is some sequence of what happens to the japa of a mantra over a period of time when we do it properly. When we do the japa of any mantra, there are a few stages we actually pass through. And most of the people are actually stuck at the first two stages. The first stage is like when you are actually uttering the mantra out loud. The second stage is when you are actually whispering the mantra. The third stage is you are not actually uttering the mantra or whispering the mantra, you are just repeating, mentally repeating the mantra. Now, these are the three stages that most of the people are stuck with. Then, after the third stage, the mantra actually gradually stops occurring. You are supposed to just feel the mantra without necessarily uttering the mantra. Then you have to feel the vibrations of the mantra and then go beyond. Majority of the time, when people actually start practice of the mantras without knowing about these stages, it goes from the first stage to the third stage. After the third stage, they start feeling that they are no longer uttering the mantra. They come back to the first stage again. They go on out loud repeating the mantra again and again. That is exactly what happens. And in that way, when the mantra is handled in this way, where you utter it out loud, or you whisper the mantra, or you actually utter the mantra at the mental level, it actually creates grossness rather than actually give you the subtlety that you need to develop as you progress towards the reality. So, if mantra japa is done without necessarily understanding the stages that you need to go through and allowing yourself to develop that subtlety, mantra japa more often than not can actually make you more and more gross rather than subtle. That's why our system is fundamentally different from most of the systems, because we emphasize this fundamental principle of moving from grossness to subtlety. That's why this is very, very important to remember about it. Gayatri Mantra done at the right time definitely has some positive benefit. But there's a big question mark about what you said earlier on about whether it actually takes you towards the center or the ultimate. There's a big question mark on that.
Not only that, Babaji talks about japa, how it should be properly done. We saw in this just now in the context of japa, ajapa, and anahat. So japa is not actual mechanical recitation of this mantra, but he says think over, recite it maybe a couple of times, and then you get into that meditative mood where you are reflecting over the meaning of this and go deeper and deeper into it. That is the actual process of japa, as per him. It is not repetition 108 times or 1008 times and things like that. That is the first thing. So we go into again the thinking to feeling, that kind of thing. We try to feel the inner vibration, finer vibrations, and then we have to have also understanding of what that mantra means. Without understanding, simply uttering these Sanskrit stanzas or shlokas is not of much avail. We have to actually get a grip of that and then go into the deeper meaning and then meditate over it. Finally, it boils down to meditation over that meaning of the mantra. That is japa. That he explains, I think, in one of the instances in this, or it comes in this complete works about japa. And also in later volumes, he refers to this aspect of japa, correct way of doing japa.
Thanks, brother.
Okay. Yeah. Maheshwar Hegde.
Namaste, brother.
Namaste.
I want to ask, this departed soul cannot become guru, or we cannot take departed soul as guru. So this maybe please explain it, how and why we cannot take. and because many people do it in other systems also. And also some people say Babuji was Lalaji, he was in connection with the Lalaji, that repeatedly used to read also. Maybe please explain this one. It was repeatedly told in a heartfulness way also, and also here also.
See, here Babuji is talking about people claiming to listen to the inner voice, although they don't have the capacity for that, because that necessary purification of the system has not happened. He talks about Mal, Lavaran, and Vikshap. They are all to be removed. Then only that once the mind is in that pure and unadulterated state, in the state of poise, you are able to actually receive those higher vibrations. Regarding, then he says, most of the time we are deluding ourselves when we claim that we are receiving instructions, or we are in communication with these departed souls, so-called departed. And he gives the example of one of his disciples who said he was in touch with Tulsidas and he was directly communicating with him. So most of the time, these are all the problems because necessary amount of background work has not happened. At the same time, he says you also can, the listening to the inner voice will happen once automatically, you reach that level of purification. He says it is the inner voice alone which guides us because you are continuously getting that inspiration from above. Now, coming to the next part of the question where he asked about, the whispers from the brighter world, where there is a continuous intercommunication between Babaji Maharaj and Lalaji Maharaj. That is not part of what we are discussing. It is departed soul means here, this is an exceptional case where Babaji Maharaj had intercommunion with not only Lalaji Maharaj, but a lot of saints and liberated souls and things like that. That we will see in the whispers. So that's a very different thing where it is actually happening. Most of the other times, people might claim I'm getting trained by so and so, or some elderly person and who is no longer in this realm, but it is mostly deluding oneself. Raghu brother.
Lalaji chooses to stay with Babuji to train him. Okay, so that was a very deliberate act on the part of the Guru to stay with the disciple in order to train him. Now that is different. Lalaji had the ability to choose to stay here and train the disciple. Although Lalaji was not visible, he could be feelable to Babuji because of his sensitivity. But that is because of his choice. When you talk about just liberated souls of the past, most of the people might not choose to stay here, might not choose to actually train the next set of disciples. So, as brother was saying, don't take that exception as the rule. In fact, Babaji used to say many times in his life that it's very easy for a moth to actually fall in a live fire and immolate itself. But rarely you come across a moth which actually immolates itself in a dead fire. Okay, the dead fire, what he meant was Lalaji was not there in terms of being around as a living guru. But he could actually, Babuji could immolate himself because of the work that Lalaji had done during the course of his training during his life itself. It's just that the work actually unfolded over a period of time with the subsequent development of that sensitivity to be able to communicate. In fact, Babuji writes that this ability to communicate with the liberated souls is not a very high attainment at all in any way. He says even in the first point, in the lowest level of super consciousness, you can actually start tapping into these souls, the liberated souls. So that's not a very high attainment or achievement in any way. And that's nothing to do with the spiritual journey. The spiritual journey might take place and then you might communicate, you might not communicate. That's a different issue. But it's not a yardstick for a spiritual journey, so to say.
Also, he talks about, there is one point, he says, if pressed between point A and B, can communicate with the liberated, but he is not revealing that to us. So it is, as he said, it's not something we focus on. It just can happen along the way. Anand Murthy, brother.
Namaste, brother. See, as we are at the first ring lecture circumference, and as we proceed proceed towards the center, where Raghupada said it is PCMB, perfect calmness, moderation, and balance. And right now he said at that center it is static. Now it's a sequential collapse from the outer circumference to the center in whatever fashion, in many dimensions. Or let me look at it simply in the state where we are right now, in the daytime. We are looking, we are seeing, we are talking, we are listening, and we are in silence during meditation. So, how is the collapse happening from subconsciousness to consciousness to superconsciousness? And how is it taking us to the perfect calmness, moderation, and balance? Is it spiral? Is it flat? Is it toroidal? Is it Mobius coil? Or is it something else?
When we talks about this attaining or going closer to the center, basically we are tracing back our journey and trying to attain the stage where we were in the purest form just at the time of creation, just after creation. So what we are doing is, says in this process is we are reversing the process of creation. So we create our own pralaya. What he means by our own, he explains what is meant by creating our own pralaya is whatever is our creation, we dissolve that, then we attain that pure state. So it is a dimensional change that happens as a result of creating our own pralaya through these processes. And that is how we reach that primal state. So it is whether toroidal in mathematical description, circular or elliptical or such things are two limiting concepts because it is a dimensional change. It is transcending from one dimension to another. And please remember, each of these chakras can be again an infinity. It is not just towards the infinity as the goal, but each of them can be a vast trap of infinity because you can get stuck in even this chakra 1 or 2, and that is what they call as avadhuta gati, where there is a horizontal expansion. That's what they refer to. It is not a vertical takeoff where you are going beyond that dimension. So it is transcending different dimensions or different regions that is happening through the process of purification and through the process of creating our own pralaya. Raghu brother, you want to tell about?
So I think we read in the Heartfulness Way, if you remember, we spoke about the unidimensional expansion, bidimensional expansion, or three-dimensional expansion, and then infinite dimension of expansion. So, but one thing is clear that what the soul wants to do is to take the shortest possible route. It
Yes,
does not want to go round and round,
right.
right? You remember you have 23 circles. So the direction of movement towards the center is absolutely important. Otherwise, if the direction of movement changes, we get stuck in curvature, which brother had mentioned in the last class as bazookas, the curvatures, where you kind of get stuck in a particular circle for a long period of time. And then it is the guru's power which can actually extricate you from that bazooka and then help you move forward. So the direction of the movement, I think we spoke about it last time also, that there is a uh, movement, so to say, in directional movement during the Pinda Pradesh. And as we go to the Brahmanda and then beyond, we have a expansive movement, which is what we're talking about, the Brahman. That's why we say it is Brahmanda Mandal. There is an expansion. There's an all-round expansion rather than a directional movement. And then you also mentioned about the push and pull, if you remember last time. The push is always in the Pinda Pradesh. And as we go to the higher points, it's the higher points, the condition of the higher points, which pulls the soul towards it. It sucks the soul towards that particular point or chakra. So I think if you can remember these points, that will be sufficient. But the direction of movement is very, very important. That is why, if you remember last class, Vijay Kumar brother mentioned about the third maxim as the most important maxim because it's the one which is actually talking about the goal.
Goal.
Your eyes
Yes.
should always be fixed in the direction of the goal. I
Correct.
just wanted to read one sloka from Mahabharata here, from Bhagavad Gita here, which I just sent recently to some people. I'll just read it for your sake. It's in Kannada, but mostly people can understand. ದೈವಿ ಪ್ರಜ್ಞೆಯಲ್ಲಿರುವ ಮನುಷ್ಯನು, the one who is immersed in divine consciousness, ನೋಡುತ್ತಿರಬಹುದು, ಕೇಳುತ್ತಿರಬಹುದು. He might be seeing, he might be hearing. ಸ್ಪರ್ಶಿಸುತ್ತಿರಬಹುದು, he might be touching. ಆಘ್ರಾಣಿಸುತ್ತಿರಬಹುದು, he might be eating. ತಿನ್ನುತ್ತಿರಬಹುದು, ನಡೆಯುತ್ತಿರಬಹುದು, he might be walking or eating. ನಿದ್ರೆ ಮಾಡುತ್ತಿರಬಹುದು, ಉಸಿರಾಡುತ್ತಿರಬಹುದು, they might be breathing, he might be sleeping. ಆದರೆ ತಾನು ಏನನ್ನೂ ಮಾಡುತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ, but he is aware that he is actually not doing anything ಎಂದು ಆತನಿಗೆ ಒಳಗಿನ ಅರಿವು ಇರುತ್ತದೆ. So he has that internal awareness that he is actually not doing anything. ಏಕೆಂದರೆ ಮಾತನಾಡುವಾಗ, ವಿಸರ್ಜಿಸುವಾಗ, ಸ್ವೀಕರಿಸುವಾಗ, ಕಣ್ಣನ್ನು ತೆರೆಯುವಾಗ, ಮುಚ್ಚುವಾಗ ಇಂದ್ರಿಯಗಳು ತಮ್ಮ ವಿಷಯಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರವರ್ತಿಸುವೆ. It is the senses and the faculties which are doing its job of what it's supposed to do. That person, that one who is immersed in divine consciousness is aware that they are actually not doing anything, so they don't get trapped in the realm of the samskaras. ತಾನು ಅವುಗಳಿಂದ ದೂರ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ ಎಂದು ಅವನಿಗೆ ತಿಳಿದಿರುತ್ತದೆ. He is far away from all of this. He is aware that he is actually far away from all of this. If you actually go back to complete works, Babuji, there are 4 levels of ego. In the first level of ego, you feel that you are the doer. When you say you are the doer, we feel that our body is the doer. In the second level, we feel that something internal is actually the doer. It could be mind, it could be internal force, it could be the guru, it could be God, it could be anything, whatever we attribute. That's the second level of the ego. Now, the third level of the ego is when we feel that none of them, either of them is not the doer, things are happening automatically. That's the third stage of ego. Then in the fourth stage of ego, you are not aware of the thing, the work also, you are not aware of the consequences of the work also. That is the fourth stage. Generally, gurus, masters are established at the fourth stage. You remember the chapter in Heartfulness Way, where Daji writes, the guru does nothing. If you remember from the Heartfulness Way, the guru chapter, he says, guru does nothing. Just the presence of the guru makes everything happen. That's all. Guru does nothing. Now, we have to gradually move towards that particular stage. Now, again, this is an examination question for you. That's why I actually answered this. So, when you read the complete works, please mark these 4 levels of ego. It's a very common question that is asked. Now, these are the 4 stages of ego. But if you actually look at the 11 circles of ego, we are talking about the mind region, the 11 circles of ego. Don't confuse that with these 4 stages of ego. Okay? You can get the question about 11 circles of ego also. You can get the question about 4 stages of ego also. These are the 4 stages that you have to remember. Okay? And I was just surprised that I was just looking at the Bhagavad Gita yesterday. So I just came across this sloka. I thought I'll just take a picture of it and I sent it to 1 or 2 people. This is exactly what Krishna also had spoken about. In other words, when you establish yourself in the state of divine consciousness, you are away from the activities of the mind and the body and the senses. You know that each of these activities is acting according, each of these faculties is acting according to what the rhythm that they have got. But you as an individual, the soul as an individual, as an entity, is not at all partaking any of these things. It's just kind of a witness. It is not doing anything. Okay? But that's something that we have to kind of experience at the higher state and then kind of develop that conviction and establish ourselves in that state as we go forward.
So, brother, what you are logically you are giving analogy is, see, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna can speak as Krishna as a two-armed mortal, or he can speak as Vishnu, which is a force, or he can speak as Brahman at the highest level. Similarly, when you say Guru does nothing, it's at the highest level, that is center. That's what you are meaning, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Vasuki?
Yes, brother. My question is related to Mala Vikshepandavarna. Can can a Abhyasi clean all these three? First one. Second one is if any person is having less of these coverings, can we assume that he has born at a higher point? Means whether he has achieved realization or a higher state, or any of such coverings can remain in higher states also.
Whether you want to take it?
See, the coverings drop off as we proceed to higher and higher stages. Finally, Babuji talks about when we get into the central region, only the identity remaining. He says even there are different levels, they're slightly dense and slightly subtler and subtler. So there are, as we saw just now, we talked about, this Aham Brahmasmi and all from Brahman and others. He says once we cross the 16 circles, even this identification with the ego, the sense of I-ness is gone. So that is the level we are talking about. There is no question of mal, avaran, vishape in such places. So most of the coverings are gone. We are in that pure form. Even the ego, because the biggest problem is the ego. If you see the 16 circles, so these 11 stages of ego or 11 circles of ego, whereas Maya is only 5 circles. So it is the real play of ego that is problematic for us. And the polarity is also there, I and between I and him. Finally, when we reach that stage of surrender, that duality disappears and only he remains, the Prabhu. So there is no question of these remaining at the higher stages. That is the question he asked.
Can I just add one or 2 points? Mala Vikshepa Avarana. As we proceed through the Pinda Pradesh, what the most important thing is the Mala. Mala is the samskaras. Okay. If you want to kind of make it very simple, the Mala is the samskaras. Now, as you proceed higher and higher, we have to get rid of the samskaras. The samskaras are there till a very high point. Sometimes it can extend up to the end of the 12th point. You can still have Mala there. Vikshepa is only in the presence of Mala, the things that appears in front of you appears distorted. If the Mala itself is removed, there is no question of distortion. You experience what it is as it is. But as long as the Mala is there, it distorts the view. That is Vikshepa. So without the Mala, there is no question of Vikshepa. Okay, that's the second level. So as and when the Mala comes down with the cleaning process, and in answer to your question, can we clean the Mala all by ourselves? The answer is no. You can clean the samskaras that you form on a day-to-day basis. But for all the deeper samskaras, you require the help of the preceptor, and then for the deepest of the samskaras, the master to be cleaned off. So the Mala is removed. What you remove as a Mala is the recently formed samskaras. The other samskaras from the earlier stages of this life or the past life is removed during the sittings that you take with the preceptor and the master. Now, that is going to reduce the Mala. As and when the Mala gets reduced, the distortion because of the Mala also correspondingly gets reduced. Okay, that's the second thing. In other words, the higher we go, the less of the Mala and less of distortion. Now coming to the third point, which is the coverings, the avarana. The avarana initially is that when the Mala is there, something needs to cover that in order that the body and the mind is supposed to function for what it is born with. The soul takes on the body and the mind for it to get back in touch with the Supreme Soul. That's the original purpose for the soul to take on the body and the mind. Otherwise, there is no need for the body, the soul to take the mind and the body. Now, the problem is, as and when we go through life, we start accumulating samskaras. Now, these samskaras will start impacting the functioning of the body and the mind. Now, what does the soul do? The soul actually covers this with an avarana, and this avarana is what you call as the ego. You remember I asked one of the questions in the past session, what is it that the ego is preserving? The ego is protecting you from the effect of the samskaras on the body and the mind. When the ego is covering these samskaras, it actually protects you from the samskaras impacting the body and the mind. We cannot work directly on the ego. We discussed this point in one of the earlier sessions. As and when you clean the samskaras, the ego gets refined. It's like as and when the air inside the balloon comes down, the size of the balloon also comes down. Very similarly, as and when the samskaras actually come down, the ego also gets refined automatically. But you reach a stage where the ego now goes back and merges into its origin or gets converted into identity. That happens at the entry into the central region. Now, is that the end of it? Is that the end of covering also? No. Now these coverings are now gone. You have a new covering there. The original covering. You remember the separateness, anxiety, and desire that we spoke about, the big desire, the anxiety, and the separateness. Those coverings are still there. But even with those coverings, you are now in the central region in direct vision of the absolute. Since you are in direct vision of the absolute, then with the aid of the master, you will be able to lose these last three coverings and then establish your connection with the center, which was the original purpose of the life for everyone. Okay, so it's a gradual process of losing the mala, then secondary the vikshepa, and then lastly the avarana. But in the mind region and the Pinda Pradesh and the mind region, you actually, as and when the samskaras are removed, the mala is removed, the vikshepa and the avarana gradually becomes less and less. It gets refined automatically. They both happen automatically. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, brother.
So
What
you
do we
have
do?
24 slides to go on now.
It's up to them. Like, should we do now? Is there any possibility of assimilation, or we want to stop?
Piyush?
Mute.
Yeah, namaste, brother. Today's topic, we had this discussion about Aham Brahmasmi, and it is we have discussed about Brahman in Heartfulness Bay also earlier, and here it says that this state of mind appears at every stage of spiritual progress in their forms. I am Brahman, all is Brahman, and all from Brahman. And it says that it comes in, the entire state in all its three aspects is in fact unity in diversity in different forms. And it appears in a crude form in Pind Pradesh. In Brahman Mandal, it becomes finer and subtler, while in Par Brahman Mandal, it becomes extremely subtle. So, I mean, I thought earlier I had thought that this Brahman is like one condition, one state. But now there are like in different forms of Brahman at different stages of is it?
No,
I mean,
we are not talking about Brahman here, but the feeling of the aspirant as if he is, I am Brahman. It is the feeling of the aspirant. We are not talking about the qualities of the Brahman itself. I am Brahman. Then I feel as if everything is coming from Brahman. All is from Brahman. So it is the stage of mind, state of mind. That's what he calls. So this happens at every stage, as we cross through different regions. He says this keeps happening cyclically. We feel, oh, everything is, I am myself the Brahman. That kind of feeling is there. That people thought, you have realized Brahman and you have become one with that. And that is the highest stage. That is the misleading thing which we had people had earlier before Babaji came and gave us. This is the highest point to be achieved. And Aham Brahmasmi is not a very nowadays. If we go to apart from our literature, this is very highly valued. People think just by merely uttering Aham Brahmasmi, you can attract. So please, we are not talking about Brahman there, but our feelings there, our state of mind.
but okay, sorry, but
No
still, I mean, how is it like at different stages for the same Brahman, you have that. So what feeling? What you're mentioning? So for one particular thing at different stages, how it is
So
everywhere you feel that it is.
see, we are having different levels of subtlety, isn't it? In the heart region, we are having certain amount of subtlety as we progress through the first 5 chakras or the 5 circles or whatever. Slowly we are becoming more and more subtle. Sushmata is there. So once we step into Brahmanda Mandal, it is of a different order. Beyond that, it is even much more subtler. That is what. So this feeling also becomes subtler and subtler. We are able to perceive that finer nuances then, or the vibrations, let's say. Not too happy.
No, I'm not able to grasp actually.
So I would say it is related to the amount, the level of subtlety that we are able to acquire. Correspondingly, we will feel this in their potency, let us say. The condition of Aham Brahmasmi, in its much more potent way, we can feel maybe at the higher levels. So, for example, when we are talking about Aham Brahmasmi, it is at a very mechanical level. We just have an intellectual understanding of what it is without really feeling, isn't it? So
Yes,
once
yes.
we go through these levels of, we are actually able to experience that state, then we are talking based on experiential knowledge. That is what Babaji was referring to. Raghu brother.
See,
Okay.
if you want to kind of just understand it from a slightly different perspective, you might not actually talk about all the qualities. Just look at it from the universal. See, there is the individual, there is the universal. That's it. There are two things. Now, every point that we go through, first point, second point, third point, each one of them have their own qualities, have their own subtleties, as brother mentioned. Look at it from this way. So when you start the meditation, we start to say at the first point at a certain level of consciousness, certain subtlety of consciousness. As we now become more subtle at the first point only, not only we are aware of the individual aspect of our existence, but we also become aware of the universal aspect of our existence. In other words, you experience the individual and the universal aspect of your existence. Wherever you actually experience the universal aspect of the experience, you are now said to be in touch with the Brahman's qualities. Not all the qualities, but that universal quality. Brahman is the universal quality. Okay, if you just look at it from this perspective, suppose you are experiencing that universal quality from the first point level of subtlety. Now you move to, so you have the three stages there in the first point. As you progress, I am Brahman. So it's in other words, you are now, you know this, what do you say, tending towards infinity. That function, when we all read in PUC, you remember in the pre-university,
Asymptote.
tending towards infinity. So something like that. You are now tending towards the universal. So you are experiencing the universal from the context of the lowest subtle level, which is the first point. As you now move to the second point, now you are far more subtler than the first point. Now you are able to experience that universal from the second point. But the same conditions are repeated, but it's now in a slightly more subtler level. As you move to the third point, the same things repeated. Again, you are tending towards universal with less coverings, with less samskaras, or with less things to actually pass through the experience of the universal. When you have come into the Brahmanda Mandal, bulk of these samskaras in the Pinda Pradesh is now out of the way. So to that extent, you are able to feel that universality far more clearly. Again, the same three stages repeat there. I am Brahman, all is Brahman, all from Brahman. It can repeat in all the three stages. It in fact repeats in every point. Every chakra that we pass through, it repeats it. But how we experience it is dependent on our subtlety, our sensitivity to be able to grasp it. It comes out in all its vividity as and when we go to the Parabrahmanda Mandal. That is what Babuji has written, the three stages. At the Parabrahmanda Mandal, at the finest level, we have it, and after that, we just cross over that particular, those three stages. We don't experience it after that. At the eighth point, you cross over it, and after that, you don't experience it. So I don't know.
Okay.
Just remember it from this particular perspective. There are two aspects of existence, an individual aspect of existence and a universal aspect of existence. Every time we touch on the universal aspect of existence, we are actually talking about the Brahman.
Okay.
Okay, tending towards universality. You can look at it, tending towards infinity or tending towards universality.
But What is that? What is that feeling? Means what is that Brahman? When say I am Brahman or all is from Brahman. So basically,
I told you the universal aspect. I
okay.
don't restrict myself to this particular body or the mind that I feel that encased in. I'm actually something beyond this body and the mind, the universal aspect of existence. So when you go, see, there are three things which actually binds an individual: the body consciousness, the mind consciousness, and the soul consciousness. So when we feel that we are actually expanding as a Brahman or we are relating to the Brahman, we are gradually getting disentangled from these three levels of consciousness: the body consciousness, the mind consciousness, and the soul consciousness. That is when we actually gradually move towards universality. For example, when we move beyond the body consciousness, we feel that we are now related to something far more bigger than just the body that we are confined in. When we go beyond the mind consciousness, we feel even more expansion. When we go towards the the consciousness, we feel even more expansion. So when we can detach from these three levels of consciousness, then we'll actually feel that the universality of the true existence.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think Vijay Kumar brother has taken a break. Since you people were also taking break. Okay, he's back now. So I think we can probably continue. It's only 24 slides. So we can actually finish it off. If that's okay. It's only about 24 slides. I think it's pretty straightforward. But so we can go through it, no problem.
Okay. So the sixth chapter is faith or Shraddha. It is interesting that it happens to be the sixth chapter, and faith or Shraddha is one of the six sampattis. We will come to that. Shat sampattis we have. So he talks about in this sequence of how we develop these topics, starting from religion to the goal of life, the ways and means to achieve that goal, and the role of the guru in this entire saga, then this kind of effective training that we have to have. What is the role of faith or Shraddha? He says will, faith, and confidence are the very key essential factors which contribute to our success on this path of realization. So three very, very important operative words: will, faith, and confidence. A strong will to achieve reality means that we are already inwardly awakened to this thought of recognizing the self, and we proceed on with this idea and we start selecting a path to achieve this goal which we set for ourselves. So we saw earlier also the very first thing to be looked at seriously is that the path we select is the right one, leading us as quickly as possible to the goal, expedient. So it is therefore quite essential to have in our mind a clear idea about the conception of the ultimate goal. And he says the goal of different people can be different in many respects, and consequently, the means to achieve these goals are also different. We saw the Laksham and Upayam. The goal determines the ways and means to achieve that particular goal. So we have to select the right path leading directly to this highest goal. That is what we are aspiring for. And it is necessary, he says, absolutely necessary at the very outset to try every possible means to judge that particular path we are trying to treat and which is being adopted by us to attain this state of realization. It has to be the right one. Otherwise, if we take a wrong path, it will diverge and we can be infinitely away from the chosen goal of realization. So this we are all familiar. If it is a small distance, we are not very far from the goal. So if it is a couple of kilometers, we can come back. But if we are going on this path for much larger distances and time, we are drifting away from the goal forever. So that is the reason why we should straight away start from the starting point on the right path. So he says a very important criteria, because a lot of people tend to believe just because it is practiced for thousands of years by our ancestors and elders, that is the right path. He says, do not follow a path because it is the oldest. Very crystal clear advice for us. For the oldest, one may be most ill suited to the changed conditions of the world and society as it is today. So what was prevalent and what was okay in say 4,000 years or 5,000 years ago, so for example during the time of Lord Krishna, might not be applicable today as a path to be taken up for achieving this goal. He also says just because the majority of people are taking up this, you don't blindly take it up. Do not follow it, because it has been followed by the majority. Again, a very crystal clear advice. He says, for the majority can also be wrong. They may not always be right, and more often led by only a chosen few, who in all possibility might have been misled. We talk about this Bhedi Chal, Bakri Ka Chal. So we must be thoroughly considerate, he says, in judging the merits of the path we are trying to take up. And we should apply all possible means at our disposal to come to a correct judgment. We should not come to a very hasty conclusion without proper consideration and trial, he says, experiment through the help of reason and experience. Tarka and Anubhava. Shruti is the third element. Reason is Tarka. We have a role for our play of reason and experience in this. Based on our personal experience and based on reasoning, we should be able to select the right path. So when we are finally convinced of these merits of the path that we are adopting, the means we are taking, then he says, once you have taken the decision, stick to it with faith and constancy. There is no question of, wavering or, again, having entertaining doubts and things like that. Once we have decided after sufficient amount of, testing or trial, once you have chosen the path, stick to it with faith and constancy. He says, faith thus reposed shall be genuine and lasting. Whereas now we see all these conversions and lots of funny things happening. He says, faith promoted by inducements offered by outwardly attractive features or display of some petty miracles or materialistic achievements is no faith at all. And he says it can be termed rightly as persuasion. And that has no basic, stable foundation to rest upon and disappears under very simple adverse circumstances. So this is another clarification he gives us. Faith thus reposed on this is genuine and lasting when it is based on correct measures taken. Also, he says, in the context of certain practices being prevalent for majority of or long periods of time being also followed by a majority of people. For example, he says idol worship in the solid material shape and sticking to these rigid forms and symbols and rituals do not actuate real faith, he says. He says, actually calls it a very, in an emphatic way, he calls it not spirituality, but materialism, this kind of idol worship, simple materialism, which promotes prejudice and not true faith in the heart of those who pursue it. And we are seeing the consequence of this, that the prejudice, if you remember, Babaji says that is the deadliest poison to spirituality, and that is promoted as a result of these sorts of mechanical forms of worship. because they blindly believe in what they are introduced or induced to do without applying reason and judgment from their side. There is no vivekam or vichakshana or discriminative power that is applied. And obviously, they will not be able to proceed ahead on this path of realization. So he says this idol worship is actually pure and simple materialism, which promotes prejudice and also gives rise to many problems. He says, in fact, whatever keeps us down and checks us from rising higher cannot be termed as faith. Very, very again emphatic no declaration, he says, about faith. Whatever keeps us in entanglement or pulls us down, instead of allowing us to rise to higher realms, is not faith. So what we have to do, we have to go back, as we said time and again, we are retracing our journey back to the time of creation. So we assume the same pure form we had at the time of creation. That is our goal. It is consequently very essential for everyone to fix their eyes on that absolute reality with faith and confidence, and adopt suitable means to achieve this realization of the self. And we have to be persistent in our efforts. We have to march on up to that final point where we assume that pure form, which we had at the time of creation. And for that, we have to renounce necessarily all our belongings of samskara, maya, and egoism, and grow lighter and lighter at every step. This is what we just now had some discussion on Mal, Avaran, and Vikshepa, and how we have to attain this subtler and subtler levels of existence and purity. So heaviness of mind or internal denseness caused by these gross forms of worship is a tremendous impediment to our spiritual advancement, and it should be avoided, he says. If we are aiming for the highest goal of purity, we should avoid all these processes and techniques which promote heaviness or internal grossness or denseness. And if we maintain these practices with ever increasing intensity, we get deeper and deeper into these entanglements or these thorny bushes of grossness and deception. And we are far away from this realm of perpetual bliss. So, for that, obviously, again, we come back to this topic of the help of a guru, whom we have to select. So, to judge the real worth of the guide, we must associate with him for some time and trying to test him by all means in our power before we accept him as the guru or master. We have to test him by whatever means is at our disposal. Because the help of the capable master is indispensable for higher spiritual attainments. He gives beautiful, this is another Mahavaki. He says he is the only medium through whom the divine impulse comes to us as an aspirant. And obviously that means we should select the guide who should be one of the highest capability and practical attainments in this field of paradise. So how do we judge the real worth of the guide? We associate with him, we test him, and then when we are convinced of his capabilities through reason and experience, again, please note very specific usage of these key operative words. Babaji is again and again coming back to these aspects where we are using reason and experience, personal experience, to make that call. Then he says we may accept him as our master and submit then to his guidance with faith. And he says if we disregard this principle, and we are likely to be deceived in our judgment. So proper judgment of the true merit of a guide or a master is very important. It should be based on the practical attainments of the master in the spiritual field. So faith, when it is based on experience, swanubhava, or experiential knowledge, we then naturally begin to feel an inward attraction for him and think him to the very person who can shape our destiny. He is referring to the master. The feeling then gradually develops into faith arch, which he says is a very high attainment. Our faith is greatly helpful to us in our spiritual progress. It also helps us, dispel all these clouds of doubt and uncertainty and removes all possible difficulties and obstructions from our path. So that is the role of true faith. So he says the foundation, faith is really the foundation of the entire structure of spirituality. Tremendously important statement, and we should ponder over this well upon what he means by this. Faith is really the foundation of the entire structure of spirituality. He says faith in reality, faith in the right course we have adopted for the realization, faith in that worthy master to whom we have submitted. That is the rock upon which you must build your edifice of spirituality if we really aim at success, he says. So, 3, 4 very, very critical component. Faith is really the foundation, and it is based on faith in reality, faith in the right course, then faith in the worthy master. All these are coming into play. So, if these all these critical factors are there in place, we will be possessed of an internal force strong enough to shatter all the problems that we have, all the evil that might surround us. He says we draw fresh divine impulse whenever we require it. So faith, that is the most pivotal and fundamental role of faith. And he says again, to dispel some misconceptions, he says some people take a very erroneous view of faith. That faith alone is enough to solve all the problems, no matter what path or guide they are following. This is again a common occurrence. We see that in our day-to-day life. People think they are actually having tremendous faith, but they are submitting to wrong things. He says nothing probably can be more misleading than this absurd belief. Very strong usage of words. So he says, is it ever possible for a person to Calcutta by taking up just the opposite direction station, train? Obviously not. So can they ever become a selfless saint by submitting themselves to a guide who's a self-seeking imposter? So very obvious and simple test. So we must never be led away by outward appearances, and we should go to the reality at the bottom. So what is important is unshakable faith in a master of high caliber, and it shall lead us to the farthest limit of spiritual attainment, he says. So any inducement based on person's outward show of knowledge, it need not be, material gains. It can be tremendous, their erudition or knowledge, that also, or eloquence, how they can, talk or give lectures and sermons. Some of us are tempted by that. We are enamored by that, and we fall into this trap of blind faith. And that can also be giving rise to disastrous results, he says. So blind faith, he says, it has its own place. It is no doubt greatly advantageous, but it has to be in the highest possible, caliber guru. Then it is very effective. So faith is the foundation, and in the true sense, it is the lively link connecting the mortal with the immortal. Again, a beautiful statement where we have to marvel at this, layers of meaning that is there in this. Faith is a lively link. Each word is very important. Lively link connecting the mortal with the immortal. So faith in the true sense is that it is affected through the medium of the master who himself is connected with that immortal. So again, a beautiful revelation. And this link, when established or connected, cannot be broken under any condition and subsists all along during the course of our march up to the final point. So this faith is what connects the mortal with the immortal, and it is there all along. It can never be broken under any circumstances. It is one of the 6 sampattis of the third sadhana of yoga, Shat sampattis. And at that stage, he says, faith is real and genuine and is so firmly established that we cannot even for a moment get away from it. So please remember, all these are very, very key operative words, and we can have many number of questions from such profound statements. What is true faith or Shraddha, and what is its role and things like that. So faith, of course, the reasons for this, are however beyond our understanding. Is before this stage, faith is really artificial and is formed or lost, gained or regained again. Many over a period of time for variety of reasons. We might be very strongly attracted, and then we might give up for some time the association and things like that. He says a worthy master actually puts up with all these emotional outbursts of love or display of love from a seeker, and he waits very patiently for the time when they come up to this actual stage of faith or Shraddha, as it is depicted in the sadhana chatushtaya, when real faith begins to assume the form of self-surrender. So it transforms to self-surrender. So real faith is nothing but surrender. That's what. So this sadhana chatushtaya, we are all familiar. I think we'll again take up this topic when we are dealing with the 9th chapter, realization. Sadhana chatushtaya are viveka, vairagya, shat sampatti, and mumukshutva. And of these shat sampattis, we have shama, dama, uparati, titiksha, shraddha, and samadhana. So shraddha is one of the 6 sampattis or shat sampattis of the sadhana chatushtaya. And our heartfulness or Ashtanga Yoga part of it is from Shama, molding or regulation of mind, Abhyas or Pravritti path. It comprises all these Ashtanga Yogas, Yama, Niyama, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. Like this. Okay. So true faith, he says, is really an unspeakable virtue. It is highly exalted, and he praises it so much, which is beyond the scope of religion. So very clear, it is in the domain of spirituality at least. It is beyond the scope of religion, this true faith. It is the dauntless courage which leads us on. So he says it is again such a beautiful aspect. It is that ubiquitous force which makes our path smooth. It is in fact the only thing that solves our problem of life. So he concludes again with very forceful statements and very revealing statements about what true faith is really. Because we all have very funny conceptions of what is faith, or rather misconceptions. And here he is revealing all these actual aspects of what should be treated as real faith. So just a recap, we started off with will, faith, and confidence, and selecting the right path. A brief discussion on these mechanical forms of worship and their consequent results. What should be the final point? Again, the selection of capable. He comes back to this discussion of capable guru selection. Time and again on all these chapters. Then faith should be based on one's own experience. It is the foundation on which the entire superstructure of spirituality rests. And then it closes this chapter with what is true faith, and a few questions to ponder over. So, very quick recap of the topic of faith. There are certain beautiful Mahavakyas or profound statements on which you have to spend some time, reflect over them. And we'll try to get these, layers of meaning from that. Let me stop. Where is this? Stop sharing. Okay, so I hope I didn't take too much time. It is 10:20. Again, open for discussion if you are still having the patience for it. Yeah, Ananta.
It is okay to ask questions, sir.
Sure. Please go ahead. I have no problem. I am quite sure. Raghu brother, if he is still around, yes, he has no problem. It is your choice and your interest.
Okay.
Anant, 1 minute. Anant, 1
Sorry.
minute. Kishore Bhatt had raised the hand. Let us finish with him. Kishore,
Huh? Okay.
Kishore Bhatt.
Brother, maybe he can go. I have two questions, so if you want, he can proceed.
Okay. Anant, you want to go first then?
Anant, you are muted.
Okay. Sorry. I had put myself on mute. So how does one demonstrate faith? I mean, partly to prove to myself, right, that I have faith. It's just some question that came to my mind.
You already given the answer, no? One of the sentences said that you have to develop faith through reason and surrender and experience. So initially, I think most of the people, it's very wrong on our part to expect that the Abhyasis will have faith in the master or in the system. I think we need to allow them to evolve, to kind of play around, to kind of have, not necessarily have a strong faith either in the system or the master. So the three faiths that is actually emphasized in this particular chapter, that we need to have faith in reality. That's the first thing. Second thing is we need to have faith in the path that you have taken. And thirdly, then you develop faith in the master. The faith in the master comes later on. In fact, as we go through the system or the practice, initially we might have some degree of faith, very little bit, not much. So as you practice, as you see things unfold in terms of your experience, as you see changes happening in your life because of the practice, then gradually you start looking at the method that you are following. Obviously, if you're coming into meditation for the sake of reality, obviously you have that faith that there is something called as reality. That faith is there. Now, whether it's kind of to a large extent, small extent, but that faith to some extent is there. Then you start following the method. In fact, in our system, a glimpse of the journey is given within a short period of time to all the Abhyasis. In a matter of few weeks to few months, a glimpse of the entire journey in terms of the trailer is given to the Abhyasi. Now, that's one thing that actually strengthens the faith to a certain extent in the path. Now, as and when you further progress from point to point or different chakras, conditions in different chakras, that increases your faith in the system. So that's the second faith to develop. Once you actually get those experiences, at some point of time, we get the curiosity, who is the giver of this particular experience that we are passing through? That is when the faith in the master gradually starts taking hold in the heart. That is when we speak about the master, it makes more sense to you. At the initial stages, it might not necessarily, because you are able to relate to the master only at a physical level. You have no experience. You have no idea what is the path that you are doing, except for that you have chosen a particular path. That's all. So it's a gradual process that we actually move on. And eventually, when we develop that faith, it actually gradually leads us to surrender. From the stage of surrender, it becomes the master's responsibility. So that's why up to the eighth point, where we develop the stage of surrender, it's a gradual process of development of the faith. As preceptors, we cannot expect every Abhyasi to come and have faith in the master or the method from day one. That's not going to be possible. That's an unrealistic expectation. We need to allow the extent to gradually develop based on the reasoning and based on the experience of the Abhyasi. That's how you gradually move towards real faith. Real faith comes in even later on. But at the eighth point, at least, it is stabilized enough where you are happy to hand over your baggage of samskaras to the master and say, please handle it for me, to that extent. But generally, that faith or the curiosity about the person who is giving these experiences or behind these experiences, That starts around the fourth point. It's around the fourth point that we become more curious. Who is the one who is giving these experiences to us as we do the meditation? By that time, we would have stabilized to some extent in the method. So the faith in the master actually comes later on, and then that actually takes hold of our journey further on.
That is what Babuji writes, about the master patiently waiting for this maturity to come in. He says all these emotional outbursts, certainly, in the beginning stages, people might weep, they might feel they are expressing their great love and all. But a stage comes when it matures. It is an unfolding or evolving relationship with the master. Finally, it is a relationship of love and leads to surrender. This highest expression of faith is in surrender. So that is why he says it's also he assigns such high value to it, saying that is the foundation upon which the entire stands. So when we come into this system, it can be based on pure trust or belief or anything like. Slowly, it will gradually, gain in value. So it is an evolving thing. There is no static definition, or we cannot stick to any one particular thing.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, brother, my first question is related to this only, like the practice part, and so you said about three things: face in practice, master, and system. Basically, master, mission, and method, which we say. Practice part is quite clear because the changes what we observe over the time, like the peace and all the which you were mentioning in the first chapter, we are approaching in the right direction. So this is clear. Then master, I understand, like obviously the behind force and who is enabling all of these things for us and how things are working out. So this is also, but in the system or the mission part of it, uh, so this is, I think, if you can help me understand a bit more in the terms like earlier, if you remember in the previous times before Daji and all, it was like, we were not this much open. We were serving people and our mission was available. But however, now with the heartfulness movement, things have changed and now we are even more open to everybody, be it egregore kind of thing. We say that for whatever reason, but can you help me understand more like this on the mission part, how this helps us, or how can we correlate with that? This is the first question. And second question is, you said faith is beyond religion, so that is also a bit, I was not sure. Somebody can have faith in God and still he could be doing some religious practices. So these two things I have.
First of all, I think you mistook the three faiths. We never said faith in the mission. That was never one of the things. We said faith in reality, faith in the path, and faith in the master.
Okay,
So where is the mission there?
or reality is the one. Okay, I wrote as system. Okay.
No, faith in reality. So only one who has some degree of faith in the reality will come in actually search of a method for reaching that reality, experiencing that reality. If you don't have any belief in reality, there's no question of actually trying to find a path to reach reality. That's not going to occur. Okay. So the first one is the faith in reality. Then you actually search for a path. That then you gradually develop based on your experiences and reasoning here, you develop faith in the path. Subsequently, you get interest behind the person who is giving you the experiences, you develop faith in the master. That's the sequence in which you actually progress. What's the second question?
Second question is like faith is beyond religion.
Religion demands blind faith, not based on reason and experience. Most of the people worship God every day in their houses. You have seen that. That's part of the religious practices. Now, if you were to ask what is the effect of the worship that you have done over the course of n number of years, very few people are actually able to answer that because it's neither relating to the reason nor relating to experience, except for the fact that it's based on some convention or culture or some practice that they have had in the family. So, here in religion, it is something to do with blind faith. When we talk about faith here in the context of spirituality, it is based on reason and experience. There is no question of any blind faith. In fact, masters do not want you to have faith in them until unless you have developed some experience or some reasoning for which you can say that you can justify yourself, say that yes, this is the reason why I have the faith. So difference is that in religion you have blind faith. In spirituality, the faith is based on reason and experience.
Actually, the faith, we have to be very clear in what context we are under on connotations. When Babuji talks about faith, he is having a very specific meaning for this. We very loosely apply this word faith, and when we talk about religion, Daji often says it is based on beliefs and dogmas. It is based on belief. So there is no supporting personal anubhava, what Brother Raghu was referring to, that it is not based on experiential knowledge. That is why Babaji says this faith has nothing to do with, it is beyond religion, because this faith is based on experiential knowledge. It is backed by that. It is not based on blind belief or dogmas, which is the domain of religion. That is the reason why he makes that distinction.
Got it. Thank you.
Anand?
Hope I can ask a second question this late. I used to have, even before Sahaj Marg, I used to have a written philosophy of life, right? Like God has a plan for me. Right? While I work towards my goals and aspirations and have a goal and plan and action. So I'm just wondering, is that a right statement of philosophy for life? It just is that
God has a plan for me. See, we were just discussing about the belief systems. This is something to do with the belief systems that we all develop as we grow. You can have two kinds of belief system. A belief system that is actually inherently positive in nature, which actually takes you in the direction of reality, or a belief system that can actually take you away from the direction of reality. Okay. Now, there was one Abhyasi who had come yesterday who had not cleared the exam. After not clearing the exam, the Abhyasi went into depression. To the extent that that person was actually feeling suicidal. So we had to get him admitted and then treated, and then he's better now. But the point is that the way that the whole instance of having not cleared the exam was handled, that itself indicates that they are not in a position to handle failures of life. That is one of the failures. It's a very small part of the life. And then I had one other phone call from another Abhyasi the same day morning who said that, brother, I'm least bothered whether I'm going to pass or not pass this exam. Every time I actually come and write the exam, I'm actually learning new things. My experience and the knowledge aspect is actually becoming better and better with every exam. So I am not worried about whether I'll clear or not clear this exam, but I'm here to actually give the exam and write it and learn from it. Now just look at these two things. What actually, both of them I have not cleared. But one is in high spirits because they have the right perspective, the right belief system. The other one had the wrong perspective and the wrong belief system about they not being capable, they not having self-confidence, all those kinds of things, negative connotation. So this particular thought that you just now mentioned, now you need to wonder about which perspective is it actually having in terms of the belief system. It's a part of the belief system. This particular thought will be part of the belief system. Is it something that's going to be detrimental for you, or is it something that's going to support you at times of distress? In general, when we have positive the belief system, it actually helps us to face life during the core times of adversities. When we have negative belief systems or belief systems that can actually be detrimental, even a single failure can actually have a knock-on impact or effect, and you actually just drastically go down. So we were just kind of telling the Abhyasi that if you don't know swimming at 3 feet, master will not allow you to dive at 15 feet in the swimming pool. Because what is going to happen to you if you are going to be allowed to dive at the 15 feet end of the pool, and even if you were to shout from under the water, who will be able to hear what is happening to you? Nobody will even know what is happening to you. So masters always take care to just make sure that the condition of the mind and the heart. The second thing is, if somebody were to not clear the exam, they should be able to handle that failure in a more equitable way. Neither you should get too elated just because somebody passed the exam, nor kind of get too distressed just because somebody is not cleared the exam. If you can handle it in a very moderate way, that actually qualifies this. In a way, if somebody does not clear the exam, for me, how they handle that situation gives me a clue how much ready are they for the preceptor book. It's a very, very simple clue. We don't need to do anything because I've had a number of people come to me for seeking of counseling for depression medications, and this person I had to admit.
Oh my God.
So it all depends on how we actually learn to deal with the best way of knowing how spiritually a person is. How do they handle the failures? That's the best way of knowing how they're actually trained spiritually. Spirituality, at the least, gives you the tools to handle the failures of life, ups and downs of life. Not because you want to run away from the life itself, but in a way that can actually be useful in terms of your evolution going forward, in terms, even in spite of the failure that you have actually encountered. So that is what is going to be the strength that spirituality is going to give. And the second thing is that it also helps you develop the right belief systems. The right belief systems can be an aid in the spiritual journey. The wrong belief systems can actually take you towards mental illness. And that is what happens. So we have two aspects to actually cross over. Initially, the samskars to get rid of. Then you have the belief system. Then we have to gradually work through the belief system and go to that state of surrender where we can actually even give away the belief systems that we've got and depend on the master after surrendering to the master. So these two aspects we have to work over and then end up in the stage of surrender where we hand over everything to the master.
See, to come back or supplement a couple of points regarding this shaping our destiny. Master talks about karma and shrama. See, he makes a very, very fine distinction here because we are all told, see, we have Bhagavad Gita shlokas which emphasize that we can only act, but we cannot, demand any karma phala for the fruits of the action. We don't have any right for that. Ma phaleshu kadachana, I said. Then Master actually that is the only instance where I saw that, puzzle being resolved, where he says, in the spiritual domain, this law applies. It is karma, where the giver knows best, like he was telling, master knows best whether you are sufficiently equipped to go to the next stage. So it is, you can never demand, although we might put in efforts. So it is always the giver who gives as a gift. It is always a gift from the giver. And whereas in the field of material sphere, the karma which we perform is definitely aligned with certain specific goals to be attained. It is a key driver. So that's why he says if everywhere you apply this concept of Mahaphalesha Kadachana, people will not act. So they say, why should I act for attaining any specific, temporary goals? So it's a beautiful explanation given by Master regarding this karma and shrama. So that also explains about this aspect of destiny and our role in that.
Thank you, bro.
So in materiality, you have rights. In spirituality, there are no rights. Okay.
So we are done. It's 10:40.
10:42. Okay. I think we did well in the second part, presenting the second part also. So I think We could have taken the questions in the end because we lost about 45 minutes for the questions. And then we had to take the second part at 10 o'clock. So
But
maybe if we have to do the two sessions, we can take a break of only 10 minutes, take one or two questions, and next time continue the second presentation, and then in the end take the questions. I think that might be a better model.
yeah, but we need that break. Otherwise, it becomes too long a session
Exactly.
for monotonous.
So what we shall do is I'll just put this recording into the YouTube, and then I'll also put a link in the candidates group. So for those people who missed out on the second part of the presentation, they can have a look at it. Okay. Anyway,
Oh,
brother,
but
if you want to put the
I
slides.
am under a bit of stress because now I have exhausted all the preparations. I have to prepare for the next couple of chapters. He has been pushing me, Anyway, let us see. We will see that.
You have
Okay.
2 more days. You have 3 more days. In fact, yours the next session is 4.
Kishore Bhatt is still raising his hand. Some more questions. Very enthusiastic group.
Sorry, brother. If you permit, and this is bit non-realistic type of, but still let me ask because it popped up to my head. So you said like in the Pind Pradesh, then that faith, the faith thing, and then from faith we drop to enter to the stage of surrender, where even this faith system we don't need anymore, and we are now into surrender. As a logical or rational thinking just came to my head, like can it happen, like suppose so far from my experiences I have found everything good in my system, and I started now I finally developed surrender to someone, obviously in this case master. uh, Suppose in this case it is master only, or suppose if any person whom I am surrendered to, then as a human or whatever, he himself knowingly or unknowingly he either misuses, I would say, or he this is more not a practical thing, or what will, I think it is not related to that. But if I am surrendering to someone in a realistic situation, in a word to word day, he can use me or whatever he want, right? So this is what I was thinking, how does this
See,
applies or not?
this we see as a normal occurrence because of the gullibility that is what is being exploited by a lot of people. Master talks about surrender as a very high attainment because that is what allows us to enter the central region. And when we are surrendered, we don't know we are surrendered. That's what you see. There is no duality there. You're not aware that you have surrendered. As long as you are saying, I have surrendered, it is not surrender. So we are talking about totally different things, and surrender is even beyond this stage of faith. It finally transforms to surrender, isn't it? So what you are referring to, because of whatever inducements people, get into this trap, definitely there is a possibility of exploitation. That's what Babuji also alluded to in the earlier stuff. He says so many can happen, and if we are not careful, we can commit blunders. That is the problem. He has been highlighting all these things for us: how to choose the right path, how to choose the right guru. Very, very important. He says most critical thing, and how to have proper training. Raghu brother.
You just need to be careful in who do you surrender to. Don't get pulled to go to the stage of surrender just because of some emotion, some obligation, various other things. So if we were to surrender to a superhuman being, this aspect of exploitation will not be there because the superhuman being does not have an ego at all. Where is the question of exploitation? They do not have any individual likes, dislikes, individual choices, nothing of that kind. Whatever comes to them comes directly from the center. So that question of exploitation will never occur at all. It's only when we actually surrender to people who have not come to that stage, there is a chance of being exploited. So it's again in our hand to see that who we are surrendering to and for what reason. I don't want to ask more questions now. We can talk about it separately.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Good night then.
Namaste.
Okay. Namaste. Thank you very much. Good night then.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you, brother.
Good night.
Thank you, brother.